Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well. In today's session, we are starting with the leftover part from the chapter The Lost Child. So before carrying on, let us just revise what we have just read in the previous session. So basically that was the story of a child who got lost in a festival of spring, and along with his parents he went to that festival, to that fair, and on his way he was drawn toward certain sort of attractive things that were displayed on his way. And on his way, what he saw, at the very first he saw a toy shop, and after that he came across a sweet meat seller who was selling certain sort of sweets. And he kept on looking at the burfi, that was his favorite sweet. And later on he came across a flower seller who was selling a garland of gulmohar flowers. All right, he also wanted to buy those, to have those. And later on, after moving a bit, he came across a balloon seller, and he wanted to have them, to possess them, all of the balloons. And after that he came across the snake charmer who was playing a flute to a snake, and he went towards him. But every now and then, whenever he was drawn to these things he was going, that were displayed on his way to the fair, just because of the, you could say, his parents, he knew that his parents would never be allow him to have those things, because he, in his mind, he knew somewhere that his mother and father, whenever he'll request to them, he will never hear, they will never have let him have those things. And after moving a while, he just came across, I think we have read, he just came across up to page number 3. He came across a roundabout, and he wanted, as he gathered the courage and asked his parents to that he want to go on that roundabout, but there was no reply. And as he looked over his shoulder, his parents had gone farther, and eventually that child was lost in that festival, in that fair. All right. And so far we have discussed this thing, and now we are going to carry on with the rest of the part. What happened when he got lost in that fair, in that festival? Okay, so let's start with the second leftover part of the story. Okay, page number 4. I'm starting from here. Okay, there was no reply. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there ahead of him. He turned to look on either side. They said they were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. Okay, now what happened? As he gathered, finally, as he gathered some courage to ask his parents to have to go to that roundabout, to go to that swing, but there was no reply. And as he looked around, there was no reply. As he looked around, there was no sign of his parents. They had gone farther, and eventually he got lost. A full deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in the real fear. Mother, father, tears rolled down from his eyes, and hot fears his flushed face with convulsed. What's the meaning of convulsed? Convulsed. Convulsed is something to, we could say, to make, you could say, a sudden movement, that is convulsion. All right. And as he looked around, there was no sign of his parents. He rushed towards the people, towards that fair, with his, with the tears rolling from his eyes. He rushed, faced with, convulsed with fear, panic stricken. What's panic stricken? He got panicked. All right. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other, hither and thither. What's the meaning of hither and thither? Stampede. That there was a whole lot of crowd, there was a whole lot of rush in that festival. He ran this in all directions, knowing not where to go. He got panicked and he had no clue, he had no idea that where to look for his parents. He was just saying, Mother, Father. He wailed. What's the meaning of wailed? To cry, you could say painfully in sorrow. It's a word of expression actually. Wailing, when a child cries, that is wailing. That we called wail. When a child cries loudly, that is wailing. All right. Moving on, he wailed. His yellow turban, his yellow turban came untied and his clothes became muddy. Having run to and fro in a rage. What's the meaning of rage? What is a rage? There are certain meanings of of the word rage, but over here the meaning of rage is fury, furious, fast. Having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated. What's the meaning of stood defeated? That after running to and fro in a furious manner, at a fast pace, he stood defeated. He hadn't found his parents yet. His cries suppressed in sobs. Again, what is sob? Sobbing. That's a sound of sobbing over here has been used. Sob. Sob, you could say to cry while taking, we could say, irregular breaths. When someone cries and that sudden or irregular breaths are there in between while crying, that is called sobbing. From there we got the word sob. At little distances on the green grass, he could see there his filmy eyes. What's the meaning of filmy eyes? Eyes full of tears, full of water. Men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches, bright yellow clothes, but there was no sign of his father and mother among these people who seemed to laugh and talk for the sake of laughing and talking. And he rolled down his eyes amongst the people, amongst the crowd, through the colorful clothes, through the colorful people, but there was no sign of his parents. Moving on, he ran quickly again, at this time to shrine. Okay, what's the meaning of shrine? Shrine places. What are shrine places? Some religious places are referred to as shrines. So over here we are taking shrine as some sort of a temple. Temple we are considering over here, and this time he rushed toward a shrine to which people seemed to be crowding. Okay, and he looked at one of a side, and there was a great stampede, there was a great rush towards a shrine place. Certain of the people, many of the people were moving toward that shrine, so he thought his parents might have gone toward that side, so he rushed toward that shrine thing. Every little inch of space here was congested. What's the meaning of congested? Crowded. Congested is your crowded. Inch was congested with men, but he ran through people's legs, his legs sobbed, lounging. Mother, father, near the entrance of the temple. Okay, so shrine over here was referred to as a temple. Okay. However, the crowd became very thick. Men jostled each other. Heavy men with flashing, murderous eyes, with hefty shoulders. Okay, and as he was approaching toward the temple, toward the shrine, there was a whole lot of crush. There was a great rush, and many of the men, they were pushing one another. The poor child struggled to thrust away. What's the meaning of to thrust away? To make a way between their feet, but been trampled underfoot. So he was young, so he could not bear up, he couldn't be there in that rush, and every now and then he was trampled, he was pushed under feet of those men. He had not shrieked at the highest pitch of his voice, Father, mother, a mother, a man in the surging crowd. What's the meaning of surging? Moving, you could say, fastly. A man in the surging crowd heard his cry and, stooping with his great difficulty, lifted him in his arms. And one of the men among those, among that crowd, one of the men, uh, he looked on that child who was crying, and he rushed towards him, and he just lifted him in his arms to save him from that crowd. Okay, moving on. And what that man did, that we are going to read. How did you get there? What he asked him. And that man, he asked him that how did you get their child? Whose baby are you? The man asked as he stared clearly. What's the meaning of stared clearly? Came out clearly. As that man lifted that lost child into his arms and came out of that great stampede, out of that rush, he asked him that whose child, whose baby are you? The man asked that child. The child wept more bitterly. What's the meaning of bitterly? Badly. Over here, the meaning of bitterly is kadwa nahi hai. Over here, the meaning of bitterly is badly. Then ever now and only cried, I want my mother and father. And in reply to that, the lost child just answered that he didn't tell him, he couldn't tell him that whose baby he is, from where he had come. He just in reply to that, he just answered that I just want my mother and my father. Alright. Next, the man tried to soothe. What's the meaning of soothe? To calm, or to, we could say, to pacify. Alright. Sorry. The man tried to soothe him by taking him to the roundabout now. And as that child was continuously crying, so that man tried to soothe him, tried to calm him, tried to pacify him, and he took him to the roundabout. Roundabout, again, the swing that uh, the child asked his parents to be on. And he to calm him, to soothe him down, that man took him to the roundabout. And what he said, will you have a ride on the horse? He gently asked as he approached the ring. The child's throat tore into a thousand shrill sobs, and he only shouted, I want my mother and father. And as the man asked the lost child that if he wanted to be on that roundabout, onto that horse, onto that swing, in reply to that, while sobbing, while crying, he just answered that I just want my parents, I just want my mom and dad. Moving on. The man headed towards the place. The man headed towards the place where the snake charmer I told you in the previous sapera जिसको हम बोल देते हैं, that's called the snake charmer, still played on a flute. Flute is your bansuri. Still played on a flute onto that swing. Cobra, listen to that nice music, child, he pleaded. And as that child was still continuously crying, so to soothe him down, to pacify him, to calm him down, he took him to the snake charmer, and he told him that how nice the music was, and just pay attention to it, to listen to it. All right. And but the child shut his ears with his fingers and shouted his double pitched strain, I want my mother and father. But the child, he couldn't be convinced, he couldn't be pacified that easily. In reply to that, again he said, I just want my mother and father. Moving on, the man took him near the balloons that the child has earlier also came across. Child, thinking the bright colors of the balloons would distract the child's attention and quieten him. Would you like a rainbow colored balloon? He persuasively asked. And later on, that man took the child to the balloon seller, and he asked if he would like to have a rainbow colored balloon, but he couldn't pacify him, couldn't calm him down. The child turned his eyes from the balloons and just sobbed, I want my mother and father. So that man, he was trying his best efforts to calm, to soothe the child down so that he could stop crying, but he was nowhere able to do so. And every question, wherever the child took the and wherever that man took the child, in reply to that he will always answer that I just want my mother and father. The man, still trying to make the child happy, bore him in the gate where the flower seller sat. Look, can you smell these nice flowers? Would you like a garland to put on around your neck? So again that man took the child to the flower seller, and he asked him if he would like to have those garlands made of gulmohar to wear them around his neck. The child turned his nose away from the basket and retreated his sob. What's the meaning of retreated? To repeat it, to repeat, we could say again. Repeated. The meaning of retreated is repeated. The child turned his nose away from the basket and reiterated his sob, I want my mom and my father. And again he replied the same answer that I just want my mother and father. Thinking to humor his disconsolate, what's the meaning of disconsolate? You could say very unhappy or unable to be uh, comfort, that we can say disconsolate. Thinking to humor his disconsolate charge by a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter to a sweet shop, to that sweetmeat seller that he had earlier come across. What sweets would you like, child? He asked. The child turned his face from the sweet shop and only sobbed, I want my mother and father. Now, the child, he had no interest in any sort of thing, any eatable or any possession. He just want his mother and father. So that was the story, and that was a easy thing, I think. Easy poem, easy story. Sorry. I hope that was clear. And in the next session, we'll be starting with the next chapter. Okay, that will be all for today's session. Thank you. Have a nice day.